making spaces where we can see how we can use technology to support civic aims, which can sometimes be for profit, but doesn't have to be, will help us see how we can use technology within our institutions and start to build this separate track of, you can be in tech to go, like that you want to work in a government, or that you want to make solutions that, neighborhoods can use, and that to use it and to sort of take it back as a power, like as a tool of power for communities that's not necessarily capitalist, but actually supports just community existence and maybe institutional and state, service provision.
My name is Olivia Chow. I am a visiting professor. I hate the word distinguished, but here at Ryerson University. I also found an organization called Institute for Change Leaders, and we teach and train people on how to engage democratically. And if they have a passion, they want to take the idea from an idea stage to actually implementing. If they have something they want to change, they come to us and we provide some skills for them. So today's panel is really talking about how do we use public space, public park or public libraries to get people engaged. We're talking about tech, how do we use technology to engage people. There are two other elements that we may not get to, but perhaps we will have time to explore, which is we collectively come together and pay taxes, and that's called government. But how do we then use that money in a more democratic way, which is a democratic form of budgeting? How can we make that happen? We may not, I'm sure we don't have time to talk about that. And fourthly, what kind of government structure, especially municipal structure, will allow for more citizens' engagement? Those are some of the areas that we may not have time, but that you can also ponder. We have Vicki, and Vicki is the Chief Librarians of City of Toronto, which is the most popular per capita library system in the world, second to Hong Kong. That's amazing. It's worthy of celebration.
Well, as Livia said, I'm Vicki Bowles. I'm the City Librarian at Toronto Public Library. I've been the City Librarian since 2015, but I've worked in libraries for over 30 years. And I really feel passionately about the difference public libraries make in the lives of individuals, in communities, and in cities. And I'm really thrilled to be part of this panel this afternoon to talk about the democratic values and civic engagement. And some of you may be sitting here wondering, well, what's the public library here talking about democracy for? What's the connection? Well, I'll tell you, public libraries have been a democratizing force in the modern world, supporting literacy and a literate population, free and open access to a diversity of information and ideas, equitable access, intellectual freedom, protection of privacy, preservation of the past, and lifelong learning. And what we're seeing in today's world is more and more challenges to these democratic values and freedoms. And these challenges can take many forms. But fundamentally, there's a growing intolerance for differences of opinion, especially when those opinions are outside the mainstream. And there is also a growing sense of isolation. Now, the library's mission is to preserve and promote universal access to a broad range of human knowledge, experience, information, and a diversity of ideas in a welcoming and supportive environment, welcoming and supportive to everyone in the community. And I think we can all agree that access to information and the healthy exchange of ideas are fundamental to our democracy, which is why we at the library are expanding the ways in which we support civic engagement in the city. And we take our role really seriously. And one approach to putting our values into action is through our programming. So to support civic engagement, it's important to provide forums where people can discuss issues as Torontonians, but also as global citizens. So last year, we launched a new series called On Civil Society. And this is the largest system-wide series we've ever offered. The new series includes author visits, workshops, podcasts, and much more, and it's running over an 18-month period. And as these programs have taken shape, I'm really struck by the central role libraries play in the life of the community, a city, and a nation. As almost all of us can see on a daily basis, our societies have become highly polarized in many ways and we've forgotten how to disagree with each other. Sure, people argue and disagree, but what seems to me is that we do less and less of is listen. Libraries are in many ways the last public spaces where disagreement is accepted and even encouraged. But even this will be lost if we don't remember how to listen to each other. So that's what our Civil Society series is all about. Respectful discussion on, and quite often, controversial topics and listening to different points of view. The series so far has become hugely popular, and not surprisingly, the tagline is, "Get out of your bubble." Another approach to civic engagement that we've been working on has been through education and promotion, and we've been doing this with a focus on electoral politics, trying to make sure people understand how to vote and encourage people to participate in the voting process. One program we presented is by Democracy Kit, and last year we offered 4 workshops to explain the workings of political election campaigns and deliver really practical lessons, tools, and connections to get started so that people could understand how to make a meaningful contribution to an election campaign. And then for the very first time, and I'm very proud of this, we launched a website to support voters in the 2018 municipal election campaign. And Know Your Vote TO was the name of a website that we launched, where voters could learn about city council candidates running for election and learn what the candidates think about various important issues here in Toronto. So the site not only gave people information about the candidates and where they were located and what ward they were running in, it also provided them people with the information about where those candidates stood on issues such as affordable housing and public transportation and more. And increasingly, the library is recognized for this kind of engagement. This was certainly reflected in the data we collected. 72% of the candidates all participated in the website and provided input into their section of the website. And we had over 23,000 distinct users visiting the site with big bumps on the day of the advanced polls and then also on election day. We've also had a focus on youth, and so we have what we call vote pop-ups. And these are simulated voting stations that were hosted in library branches across the city, and we focused on areas where there's been low voter turnout. Library staff and youth volunteers actually simulate a vote about an important local issue, giving our teens an opportunity to practice voting in a safe and supportive environment. So we offered vote pop-ups at 8 locations in collaboration with Ryerson's Democratic Engagement Exchange. And the program has been particularly effective in reaching young people and helping them understand and not be intimidated by the voting process. And as an example, at Cedar Brae is a branch in the middle of Scarborough, their youth advisory group ran 2 voter pop-ups on their own, and over 150 teens participated. Civic engagement, though, isn't just about these things. It's also about citizenship. And newcomer settlement has been a long-standing and important area of work that the library has been engaged in for many years. And in addition to supporting newcomers find employment and housing and upgrade skills and learn English, we also encourage newcomers to become citizens because we think that's a really important step in the immigration journey. And we have a homepage, on our homepage, we have a section called New to Canada that people can access. And on that section of the website, the most popular feature is the citizenship practice test. So we also promote civic engagement by sharing information at community events and meetings. So our approach to community and outreach and engagement emphasizes active listening and community collaboration. Those are two important key features of how we work in communities. And so, for instance, we work with neighborhood improvement area groups to hear about community needs, and then we make efforts to respond with supports for whatever those needs might be. And these local relationships often result in co-sponsored programs that connect people with subject experts, with technologies, and opportunities to learn and come together in the library based on their interests. And I'll just give you a couple of examples of these kinds of initiatives. In the Parkdale community, we presented Displaced in Parkdale, Gentrification in the Parkdale community. And that was part of our civil society series. Another initiative was with the Canadian Film Centre Media Lab and the Parkdale Economic Community Development Group to create the first ever augmented reality Jane's Walk. So what that involved was 100 walkers used iPads as part of their Jane's Walk to see images of how developers and community organizations are reimagining the neighborhood and how each vision affects the community at large. And following the walk, then everyone got together to discuss what they'd seen. So in terms of where we're going from here and looking ahead to the next year, one of the things that we always talk about is the fact that the public library, and in Toronto we have 100 branches, we're not just one institution. We're actually 100 institutions in 100 different neighborhoods serving and reaching people where they live. So this year, we will be exploring how to build on that community presence and all the work that we've done on civic engagement to develop the library and become known as a civic commons in the city of Toronto. The public library is a civic commons, and we will be working to provide community groups and individuals with space within their communities to discuss important issues that are important to them in terms of their local democracy, but also in terms of their everyday life. Thank you very much.
I am Bianca Wiley. I am the co-founder of a group called Tech Reset Canada, and we are a group that, what do we say we do? We're looking to find and support the public good in the innovation economy. I've been struggling with both the terms public good lately and innovation economy for multiple reasons. But I think the way I'd like to introduce myself is someone who is stepping in it and screwing up efforts to do advocacy every day, multiple times a day. So I think part of my job here is to share some of those things with you. I don't think it's because I'm not trying. I think it's because I'm trying to work in a space that is very new, which is how do we as a society, and to get to the point of today's session, a local community respond to the impacts of technology when they're beginning to intersect with our governance and our democracy and our culture. And beginning is the wrong word. They have been for a long time. But if you get a chance to talk to Tracy Lorio, she's right there, she's a colleague and friend, she put it very well that we don't really have a democratic approach to managing, technology. We don't. It's historically been something that we buy and use. But we don't really think about what our job is in how it's created and how it's used in some of our institutions. So the one thing I'd like to talk about today is there's really two tracks that I see right now in our political landscape, our local political landscape. And they're challenging the existing power structure. So I'm going to give you an example. I've been working a lot around a project that's like a smart city project in Toronto. It's Sidewalk Labs, which is an Alphabet company. They're working on Toronto's waterfront to design a community of the future, neighborhood of the future, smart city, intelligent community, whatever you want to call it. And through this work, I've talked to a range of people who, some of them are elected officials, some of them are working on the project, and I've heard multiple times something that disturbs me, and it is basically that, well, city planning and the municipal government isn't exactly working, so it's time to start trying new things. It's time to disrupt how we do neighborhood planning. And I hear that and I think, if it's not working, rather than create a technological or private sector workaround, how about we fix it? The scariest part of the story I'm telling you is that I've had people who work in government, elected officials, tell me that they'd rather go for the workaround. When I hear the government having lost faith in the government, I'm a lot concerned. But I also know that there's a reason for that. I know that these are people who care about cities, who care about people, who care about institutions, and so I don't take it lightly that there aren't some things that need to change. But I think we are at a moment in time where, if we're not careful, we're going to start doing things where we are procuring values, where our governments aren't just buying little pieces of software, they're actually buying systems of power. Those systems of power are being constructed by technology companies which have for-profit motives. I'm going to give you a little example about the TTC. Does anybody here have an app that's called Safe TTC? Safe TTC. Anybody have that one? Just going to mark that down in my book. If you live in Toronto, the TTC spent $500,000 on a license for this product, a 2-year license. And one of the major features of this product is that you can take a picture. If you're on the TTC and you're getting harassed or you're having a problem, you can take a picture of something and report it to the TTC. When it was initially launched, it was like, the software lets you disable the flash so people won't know you're taking a picture. You're not even laughing. I was like, this is ridiculous. Really? That's what we're buying? Like, this is ridiculous. But that's also like stealth citizen policing. The culture that begins to encourage is that you're doing policing of your fellow residents. The solution that this does not encourage is something that women have taught me over the years, which is when you see a woman being harassed on the TTC, it is free to go up to her and say, oh, I haven't seen you in so long. How are you? You doing good? Yeah, I'm doing all right. Yeah, you good? You good? And you kind of get in there, and you can disable and disarm a problematic situation. You can do that with other people. Those are the solutions that I'd like to see us remembering that we have as a society and as a culture, particularly when we're in times of austerity. Those are the things I'd like to see us remembering that we can do. So if we fall too far sort of down this trap right now, and I'm going to end on this area because it's really messy, and is George in the room? I just had a quick chat with George. I don't know if he's here. I was asking him if within the urbanism community there was someone who was doing a really good job of kindly and lovingly challenging what I would consider the urban elite right now, the urbanistas, the progressives, the ones who are like, we know what's good for you. We know how to do affordability and accessibility and inclusivity. We know how to do that. Just trust us. We just need a bit more time. We've got some new tools here. They've had a shot at this thing for decades. I don't feel good giving them further ammunition that generally accelerates thinking. The way I see a lot of the elite urban planners right now is that they are so sure that what they know and what they're about to do is so good, and they just need a few more tools to do it, because then they could just finish really what needs to be resolved. When I look at the city that we live in today, the core is rotten. Things are underfunded. Poor people need money. They need housing. They need access to services. There's a whole bunch of other issues in there, but they're not technological problems. They're funding and political problems. These are things that, if we go too far down the twiddling down the edges narrative that technology likes to take us, will continue to ask people to wait for justice. We've been doing that for a long time already. And so I think it's really, really important right now that we take a minute to consider the latent power that exists in our local institutions, in our libraries as places to come together, within our municipal governments, and to make sure that as much as we listen to people who have very good reason, and I can argue on either side of this one, to destroy and finish the state because it has been a racist, violent construct. It also happens to be the institution that when we have to move fast, if we can take its power and apply it for good, we can do things right now and we have to do them urgently. But those things have to be done with a set of values that are not grounded in profit.
Hello, everyone. Thank you all for being here. My name is Eleanor Finley, and it's really an honor to be invited to come speak at this event and to be participating in this conversation with you all. I am an anthropologist at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. I study democracy discourse, as well as new forms of participatory decision-making that social movements are coming up with today as a solution to the crisis that we are all experiencing in decision-making and power in our society. I've also, for a long time, been a member of the Institute for Social Ecology, which has looked at how democracy and the ecological crisis intersect. And I'm a member of Symbiosis, which is an organization in the United States that is working to bring a network of grassroots institutions together to talk about systemic change on a broader level. And I also work around Kurdish solidarity activism. I'll be sharing some details about the Kurdish liberation movement here, hopefully, if I have time. And that movement has really brought about an inspiring model of alternative democracy called democratic confederalism. So in her opening remarks, Asta Taylor mentioned my anarchist friends talking about democracy, and I may be sort of one of those anarchist friends, though I don't actually know Asta Taylor. So I'm here today to talk about an emerging paradigm of democracy called municipalism, or communalism, or democratic confederalism. There's sort of an emerging cluster of names for a family of social movements that is really rethinking the fundamental institutions through which we make decisions in our society, and which, crucially, are confronting capitalism as a part of that project. So when I speak about municipalism as an emerging family of social movements, it's a kind of social movement that is really taking on, I would say, the underlying causes of the democratic crisis that we're in today. It didn't just come out of nowhere. Populism did not just come out of nowhere. The system of capitalism has been systemically eroding popular power in the service of profit. And at the same time, as my previous speaker just mentioned, the nation state has never really been democratic. And it's time now to think about new institutions. So municipalism or communalism, democratic confederalism, is a family of social and political movements that are reviving popular assemblies at the local and municipal level as a means to create social movements that are networked holistically, that are confronting issues of ecological crisis, of patriarchy, racism, colonization, and political disempowerment at the same time. So some key features of municipalism or municipalist movements is that they are holistic, they are community-based, and that they are seeking qualitative institutional change. And the basis of that institutional change is through popular assemblies, civic collectives, citizens' platforms, citizens' initiatives, as well as confederal and federal relationships between civic groups. So the objective of these projects is not just to bring power to the municipal level and to municipal governments, but to change how municipal governance is actually run. And so a couple of examples today that we see of municipalist movements. The two that I'm most familiar with and that I have worked with in my ethnographic work, the first is Barcelona and Camus, which is a citizens platform based in Barcelona and Catalonia. And they emerged out of the 2001 Indignados movement, which some of you may remember as a worldwide explosion of people going into the streets and having these very big urban popular assemblies. Barcelona and Camus took that energy and brought it down onto the neighborhood level and started having neighborhood assemblies where people would come together and talk about the issues which really impacted them and how to build solutions together as citizens. So one of the key issues for Barcelona and Camus was the skyrocketing rents in the city and the influx of tourism that was really shredding the fabric of everyday civic life. So Barcelona and Camus have been operating for a number of years now. They've actually had some success in the municipal government. Ada Colau, the mayor of Barcelona, is a part of Barcelona and Camus. And they've been able to put a cap on the number of new of new hotel licenses in the city. They've been tackling Airbnb, and they've also been working to confront the banks who conduct evictions in the city. Another example, and at the same time that they're doing this in the mayor's office, they're still having networks of assemblies at the neighborhood level that are coming together, once a week, once a month, to discuss the issues that affect them, how they want to see policy changing at the broader municipal level, but also how people can affect change together directly as neighbors. Another example of municipalism or democratic confederalism, thank you, in action is with the Kurdish freedom movement, which is a large, multifaceted movement that has been seeking direct grassroots political change and direct democracy in the Middle East. They do so against very intense and violent repression by the Turkish state. You may have heard of the conflict in northern Syria and Rojava with the Syrian Democratic Forces. Starting in 2014, the Kurdish majority of the region of Rojava pushed out the Assad regime and created networks of civil councils, popular assemblies, and confederations, true direct democracy. So that's a very different context than the ones many of us find ourselves in today. However, it's a very inspiring example of how even under the worst conditions and under conditions that seem hopeless, we can affect true institutional, fundamental, systemic change. There are many other examples around the world of this kind of paradigm emerging that is, once again, it's holistic. It is seeking ecological change, seeking women in leadership positions, pursuing economic democracy, really tackling the fundamental bread and butter issues that impact our everyday lives. And some other examples include in Bologna, Italy, there's a group called Coalizione Civica that is working to combat the rising tide of fascism there, as well as to combat development in Goma and the Democratic Republic of the Congo, there are people fighting for their water rights. So I'll leave it there and say that social movements today are really indicating that we don't just need to bring power to the municipal level and into cities, but we need to change how cities are actually run. Thank you.
In England, there is something called participatorycity.org, and they create space for people to participate. And it's everyone, every day. And it doesn't take much time. It costs no money. It's totally accessible. What are some of the imaginative things that you can see that perhaps a storefront, free, people can come together to start off business, start off tech things, start a group, learn something together? Can it be done in the library, in your study? Eleanor, have you seen that kind of thing? Have you seen how technology can help bring people together rather than just saying individual solutions? Can we train people how to deal with TDC situations rather than film them, right? Can we do role play? What are some of the creative things that you would love to see happen? Whether it's in the library, is in the community centers, in people's homes, in the storefront, empty stores. What are some of the concepts that you believe in? Dream out loud.
I have, it's not going to sound that exciting, but some kind of creative insurance.
Okay, go for it.
Because a lot of I'm looking at Melissa here. Melissa was in Malta recently, right? And was telling me stories about wonderful fireworks parties that were happening, but she was also, I don't want to screw this up, but basically watching and thinking like, wow, this is pretty, this is pretty unregulated here. This is like a free-for-all with everybody doing the fireworks and kids running around, and didn't seem like liability was a word that was on anyone's mind. And I have seen that in the city, in many places, where even though you kind of want to open up a space, I think storefronts are great, when they have condos and you don't have a tenant in the front or whatever else. But it's that liability regime, it's the insurance regimes that make it really, really difficult. And so we've got this cultural construct there, which is fair, but also seems to be really blocking stuff. So how do we develop some sort of cultural capacity to be supportive of things and know that there are risks and still figure out how to do it amongst ourselves a bit? Because a lot of the spaces seem to be grappling with this thing about insurance. There's empty spaces, but then you run into the thing and you go, well, who's dealing with the liability? And then it just shuts down. And so I think that's a fascinating way of showing how there's global, we're better at protecting capital than we are creating spaces for the kind of engagement that you're talking about, Olivia. So I don't have a good solution, but I got the start of something that would be helpful, to get around that somehow would be good.
Well, I touched on this at the end of what I was talking about, which is the idea of the public library as a civic commons. And I'm looking at John Schaffner here, who Pam Ryan from the library and I met with not too long ago to talk about the whole concept of the public library as a civic commons. And really that is something that I think the library already is, but what we have to do is to expand and that understanding so that people will think of the library as the civic commons, the place to come together for public forums, for public democracy, for issues that are important to them to discuss with their fellow citizens. So I feel that the public library as the civic commons is something that we really have to develop and build on and expand the understanding so that people understand that that's what the library is all about.
So I can borrow a sewing machine, or I could have a seed exchange or something.
Yes, well, we do have a sewing fabrication lab at the library, and we teach people how to sew, but we also have all sorts of e-learning centers and digital innovation hubs and pop-up learning labs where people learn about the newest technologies, about STEM, about coding, all the things that they need in terms of today's world and being successful in today's world. So making that technology accessible is one thing, but really what it's doing is it's democratizing access, and that's what I think the library is all about.
Mm-hmm. Eleanor?
Yeah, I want to echo that as well, is that libraries are precious. Particularly coming from the United States, where we have quite a lot of erosion of public space, of public institutions. Public libraries are some of the last public spaces and one of the last places that people can just go and be and not have to spend money. So I want to echo that. Something that I would add, you asked to dream big. My dream would be simply to change transportation in the cities
Free
and
TTC.
to change really how space is used. There's so much space that is being dedicated to concrete, to sidewalks, to street, to objects, instead of being used by real people in real places. Barcelona and Camus have a program. It's just an idea right now, but it's a proposal for what they call super blocks. And the idea is that you block off traffic to just a couple of streets, and then traffic sort of has to move through major thoroughfares. Often at night, the streets can reopen. And there have been a couple of experiments in different parts of Spain for this. And what those experiments have shown have been just a renaissance in civic life. The noise cuts down, the pollution cuts down, suddenly streets are safe again for children to play in, and you see the seed of everyday public life starts to grow again once we just get these machines out of the way. So that would really be my dream. If I could just snap my fingers and make one thing happen, would be to really transform how we use space in cities and to make room for people instead of cars.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that the participatory city has been doing is that they encourage people to form clubs. So they're not just learning. They have a learning club, or they start a business. They could start selling whatever they sold to other people and then start a little company, that kind of thing. Have you seen other models? Can they learn how to sell things online? Or I'm trying to bring technology into this. Have you seen, Bianca, that kind of encouragement? That you can, because we buy a lot of things online now, so we don't even interact with each other when we shop.
It's true. It's true. I'm going to take this baton you're handing me and take it a little different direction with the technology connection here, because I think the thing, and it ties back to libraries as well, is that making spaces where we can see how we can use technology to support civic aims, which can sometimes be for profit but doesn't have to be, will help us see how we can use technology within our institutions and start to build this separate track of, you can be in tech to go, like that you want to work in a government, or that you want to make solutions that, neighborhoods can use, and that to use it and to sort of take it back as a power, like as a tool of power for communities that's not necessarily capitalist, but actually supports just community existence and maybe institutional and state, service provision. But I think, exactly to your point, a lot of the places where you get into technology, it's and I think this is so important with libraries too, is that it's not just learning to become labor for someone else. Like, you don't learn STEM because you're going to get a job only. I think we need to think about learning it as a literacy in order to have it be an empowering technology, and how can you bring it into other places and use it, in different ways. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the way to start building out a different future than one where we're like buying values. Like, we can start building with them as well, which is interesting. Quick story, because it reminds me of literacy in libraries. Someone years ago from, and I'm not someone who thinks everybody should learn to code. I'm just going to preface this story with that. But basically, they said that a lot of people now get the internet on their phone, mm-hmm. right? Like, a lot of people are just using the internet on the phone, and they're saying, well, this is great, everybody's online, you've got the internet, and it's very passive, because you're consuming the internet, but you're not building it. You don't develop software on your phone. I mean, by now there's probably some program where you kind of can, but generally speaking, you don't see software developers like tapping on their keyboard on a cell phone to be writing software programs. And the point of this is that literacy is often, I think, thought of as reading, but it's equal parts important to learn how to write. You know what I mean? And so that's the thing, I think, with technology is how do you also make it something that you can produce, not just something you can consume? And all of these spaces that we're talking about are perfect places to do that, to put sensors out and play in public space without it being for profit necessarily.
One thing I just want to build on what Bianca was saying is that public libraries, and we in Toronto here, we've launched a new stream of programming about algorithmic literacy. It's a different kind of literacy. To understand, I know everyone goes, what's that?
What's that?
Algorithms fuel artificial intelligence. And we've seen what algorithms have done, for instance, with Facebook and how it influences decision making. And we've all, searched for something on a retail site, and then all of a sudden it's popping up wherever you are on the internet. And so what we're going to be teaching people is we'll have speakers come and talk to us. There's a recent book about the algorithm called Algorithms of Oppression and how algorithms are increasing racism or reinforcing racism and other things in society. So we'll bring in speakers. We're also going to help people understand how algorithms work so they understand when they're doing a search on the internet, how algorithms can be shaping the information that is fed back to them in their searches. So this is really, I think, an important democratic initiative because people need to understand what is happening with the technology that they're using and it's how it's influencing them. So that's a really important initiative that we are launching in 2019.
Wow. Okay. Interesting. One extra comment. Yes, Eleanor.
Briefly, I'd like to add an example from a movement today called Cooperation Jackson in Jackson, Mississippi. This is an organization working to bring economic democracy to one of the poorest cities in the country, where 85% of the population is Black, is African American, and excuse me, I think I have that wrong.
What did they do?
Excuse me?
Sorry, go ahead. I'm just trying to open it up to audience.
Where a vast majority of the population is African American, and a vast majority of the wealth is held by whites, and they have created a digital fabrication lab, a fab lab in the city, where people can come, it's publicly, freely open and available, and work with 3D printers, work with different kinds of advanced technology that is ultimately the space belongs to the city. It's not people producing technology for sale, but...
and it's free.
And it's free, yeah. And they worked with a local election campaign in the city that on the platform to make this fabrication lab happen, and they just opened it up.
Oh, fascinating. Thank you so much, and let's give the panelists a big round of applause.
And thank you for Olivia. I think you win Facilitator of the Day. That was remarkable work.